We have an exciting seminar today. And this time around, we have it from one of our own, Professor Kemi Yekini. It's not straightforward and easy to introduce my colleague Kemi, but let me just be just brief and say that Kemi joined SOAS, University of London, in 2019, just very recently. She is a qualified chartered accountant, and most interestingly, as I always introduce her, she's the first ever professor of accounting in the history of SOAS. In the 100-year history of SOAS, she's the first ever professor of accounting in the School of Finance and Management. She is, as I said, a qualified accountant, and she has had many years at the core face as a practitioner, working with the accounting firms, and also an accomplished researcher. So combining both the exemplary achievements as a practitioner, as a qualified practitioner, but also as a researcher in the area of accounting. And I know you may have read the CV that presented for Kemi and the bio in advertising this forum. But I would like to add something extra, that Kemi has been working on frontier research and frontier methodologies of using digital information, semiotics, from published annual reports and financial accounting statements to be able to infer the behavior not only of accountants, but also the behavior of CEOs of companies. And this methodology is in a way a breakthrough and has created a lot of excitement in research terms. In addition to that, she's done quite a lot of work on corporate disclosure practices and transparency and quality of narrative disclosures, corporate governance and bank performance. And over time, she has published in the topmost journals in accounting, including Accounting Forum, Accounting, Auditing, and Accountability. I could keep on reading. The list is absolutely a long one. And previously, before coming to SOAS, she worked at Leicester Business School and also worked at the University of Nottingham, where she was an associate professor and a divisional director of research for the accounting department. Now, I could go on introducing Kemi on her main achievements, but today she brings to us extra excitement, looking into the role of accountants in IT governance. So, Kemi, the floor is yours. Welcome. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Victor, for the introduction. And I want to welcome everyone to this session once again. So the session has been well introduced by Victor, so I don't need to bore you with further introduction of the session. But one thing I do want to say is that I recognize the fact that I'm presenting to an audience that are mostly finance oriented, and I've attended a lot of the seminars here. It has always been finance, fintech, banking, and all that. And I've always said to myself, why is nobody talking about accounting? Because that is my passion. That is where I belong. And I thought, so when Meng asked me what I would be presenting on, I said to myself that I'm in the Center of Global Finance to represent accountants because that's my calling and that's, where my passion is. So I said, okay, I'll look for something to talk about. And just around that time, I was invited by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, the Canada district, to present this topic in their annual International Accountants Conference. And so while I was preparing for this, I said to myself that, okay, if I'm going to be presenting this to professional accountants, just to inform their service to their various organizations, why don't I bring out some researchable agenda from this? And so I started thinking of, what I need to present to them and how I can turn this into research agenda. So it's in the middle of that Meng approached me for a topic, and I said, okay, I'll throw it up as a topic to be discussed. So it's not really a paper. I have not developed it into a paper or into a research. It's just an idea. So I said to Victor that what I want to present today is a research idea that I want us to more or less brainstorm to see what research agenda we can bring out of it. So, like I said earlier, this seminar has been predominantly finance and fintech. So I want to introduce a new, a new idea into it. I want us to talk about accounting as well, because I'm a member of the center. And if I'm a member of the center, then we shouldn't just concentrate on finance and fintech. So let's talk about accounting today. So now what I want to do is I want to, talk about the area. It's an emerging area that research is very scanty in. There are a few research in the area, but it's still very scanty. Because you see, accountants believe more in working in the office. They don't believe in doing research like you are doing. And the reason is because they think there's nothing to research in accounting. So I remember a friend of mine asking me sometimes ago when he realized that I've moved to academics. He said, what are you researching? There's nothing to research in accounting. Is it just the debit and credit? I said, no, there's a whole lot of area to research in accounting. And so, yeah, so that's just to give you the background of the topic and to let you know that it's not really a paper, but an idea that I want to present to the finance community and, of course, to the audience that I've got before me today, that I want us to brainstorm on and to see some possible, research ideas that can come out of it. By the way, because I'm doing a slideshow, I cannot see anybody and I cannot see my chat. But like Victor said, if you have any question, put them in the chat there, and maybe after the presentation, we will discuss and also look at the questions together. So just before I start, I want to remind us of the, the environment that we are at in the world today, and that is a cashless environment. In last week's reading group, we were talking about a cashless society. So, and that's what seemed to be what characterized our environment today. We are more or less now cashless. Everybody goes about with their credit card, with their bank in their pocket. Some of us even have our bank in our phone and all of that. So that's what we are in at the moment. It's cloud-based. Everything is data-driven. We are all platform powered. We've all gone viral. Everything is automated and connected. So that's the world we are in. And in the midst of all of this, businesses must carry on. Accountants must, provide their services and all of that and all of that. And so, which is why today's topic, to me, I see is very, very important. Because in today's business, we have seen that we can no longer do with IT. In some 20, maybe 15 years back, some organizations can choose not to incorporate IT into what they do. But even a sole trader or someone who is operating right from their room these days will barely be able to carry out any business without IT. So it has not only become a competitive resource to differentiate and provide competitive advantage in some industry, it has more or less becoming the survivor of some other industry. And so how this IT, that is information technology, is managed in the entity will have a significant impact on whether that entity will attain their vision, mission, and then strategic goal, or whether that entity will fail. And that is why today we want to explore the role of accountants as the gatekeeper of governance and also financial information. You know, as accountants, we are trained to be custodians of the information or information need of our organizations. And playing that role in the midst of the technological advancements that the world finds itself today is very key to the profession. And, you know, if you're an accountant today and you are not IT skilled, you will realize that you will soon be getting out of job. So, and that is why this topic is very important to me. Yeah. So we are going to look at the significant role that accountants need to play in the governance of this information technology. So because information technology is all about the information, access to information, the processes of information, and this is the role of accountant. They are the custodian of this information. And so for them to be able to, you know, play their role as accountants to their organization, they need to understand what all of this is all about. So that's just what we are going to be looking at. So our objective basically is to understand, first of all, IT governance principles, because I realize that there are lots of misconceptions around IT governance. We are going to see or explore how aligning IT governance with the organization's enterprise corporate governance can work. Can it really work? Is it really possible? You know, is it being done? You know, those are the things we want to explore. And we're going to look at how the accountant can make it happen. So looking at that objective, so I split the agenda into three. One, we'll talk about the principle, like I said, and then we'll now move on to look at the research agendas that I mentioned earlier. I presented it to the professionals, not as a research agenda, but as a must-do for accountants. But because I'm talking to academic community, I want us to see it as a research agenda, research area that we need to discuss today. So I'm going to be looking at the alignment of IT with the organization's enterprise corporate governance, and then the accountant's role. So let's start straight away. So the term IT governance, to define that term IT governance, is important that we first of all go back to remind ourselves of what corporate governance means. And I'm not going to use any serious or long or complicated definitions. I'm just going to borrow that of Cadbury. The definition provided to us by Cadbury when he was asked to prepare reports on it. So we know that report as Cadbury 1992 report. So he defined enterprise corporate governance as a whole system of controls, financial and otherwise, which ensure that a firm or a company is directed in the right way and towards the right direction. So the phrase I want us to hold on to here is the fact that corporate governance is a whole system of controls, financial and otherwise. So if we hold on to that, it can then help us to define IT governance. So we can therefore say IT governance is that term used to describe how those persons that are entrusted with the governance of an organization incorporate IT into their governance role. So in their supervision, monitoring, control, and direction, how do they consider IT supervision or IT governance, IT monitoring as well into this governance role. Or in another way, we can say it is the ability of the governing body of the enterprise to direct, measure, and evaluate IT resources in support of the organization's strategic goal. What am I saying here? You see, when we talk about corporate governance or the role of the board of directors, most of the time we are looking at the board as, concerning themselves with the strategic direction of the organization, and most of the time they are looking at the main agenda of the company, what they are into, how to maybe navigate into other markets, and all of those strategic decisions. IT governance or IT management, if I use that word, is usually left to management. But what I'm saying here, or the research agenda that I'm trying to put across here, is that IT governance should not be limited or left to the management level. IT governance entails that the governance of IT be embedded into the enterprise-wide corporate governance. That is, it should also have a board level recognition. Board level recognition, that is what that word is. So looking at IT governance in this way can therefore help us to determine what IT governance is and what it is not. Now, IT governance is an enabling framework. So it's like saying, a governance framework for decision-making and accountability in IT-related processes. Is a means of ensuring business IT collaboration, to ensure that there is consistency and efficiency in the running of the business. And it's a critical component of ensuring delivery of business value from IT spend. Now, you will agree with me that IT spend is huge. And investing that amount of fund in a project, you will want to get something for your, get a value for your spend. And so, because IT governance, IT spend is huge, we can say IT governance is also a critical component of ensuring that the amount spent on IT delivers value for the business. Okay, so, and also IT governance is not a one-time project. It's something that has to be reviewed, revalidated for efficiency, measured, and so on. It is an ongoing thing. IT governance should not be designed tacitly. It should be purposeful. It's something that the business should see as, a must do, and, be purposeful about it. It's not limited to just making decisions about, acquiring technology or going automated. And it is not an annoying finger-waving roadblock in the way of just to get things done. Let's put some technology here. No, I always say it is a serious business. It is something that has to be taken very seriously by every organization. Now, a misconception that I also quickly want to clear before we move on is the difference between IT governance and IT management, because it's often used interchangeably, but there are clear differences. Now, IT governance sets direction through prioritization and decision making, while management executes, operates, and monitor IT activities as determined by IT governance. So the governance sets the direction, set the objectives, prioritize what needs to be done. Management of IT only executes what has been set. Now, governance aligns with the mission and vision of the organization, while management implements based on the direction provided by the governance. So what we are concerned about is the governance of IT, not the management. In managing IT in organization, there are lots of software that are out there. There is COBIT, there is all of these different software. I'm not going to talk about that today. So we are looking at the governance aspect of it at the board level. So IT governance principle, therefore, entails setting objective, like I said, for the enterprise. the objective can be whether to ensure objective to ensure that IT is aligned with the business, or IT enables the business to maximize profits, benefits. IT resources are used responsibly, IT related links are managed, and so on. It also entails providing the initial direction. After setting the objective, then the initial direction on how this objective will be achieved is also part of the governance role. So that is the IT activities that needs to take place for us to achieve the set objective. For example, increasing automation with minimal cost, and also managing risk. And in addition to providing this initial objective, there is need to put in place mechanisms to measure performance. And then in measuring performance, we compare the results of performance with the objective initially set, and the circle keeps going. So it's more or less like, a loop that keeps going. Provide, set the objective, provide direction, monitor the direction, the activities, measure performance, compare performance with objective, and then it keeps going. So that is the principle. That's the principle behind IT governance. Okay, so fundamentally, the IT governance is set out to achieve two main objectives, and that is IT's delivery of value. I said earlier that IT spend is huge. So the governance process is to ensure that there is value for money. So the entire objective, I would say the overall objective of IT governance is to ensure that IT deliver value, and also to mitigate risk that could be associated with the use of IT in delivering value. So value delivery, meanwhile, will be driven by the strategic alignment of IT with the business, while risk mitigation will be driven by embedding accountability into the enterprise as a whole. And of course, this will have to be well resourced and managed by through the governance process. So that therefore points us to 5 key areas. If you listen very well to what I was saying here, the outcome, or what IT governance is set to achieve, is value delivery and risk mitigation, but which has to be driven by strategic alignment, and so on. So that points to 5 focus areas of IT governance as identified by the IT Governance Institute. IT Governance Institute. So they've identified 5 main focus areas, which they refer to as the value delivery that we have mentioned, which is one of the outcome, risk mitigation, strategic alignment, resource management, and performance measurement. So the value delivery and risk management that I mentioned are the outcome, like I said, and the other 3, strategic alignment, performance measurement, and resource management, are drivers, are what will assist us to achieve the outcomes. So, and it also operates like a loop, just like the previous diagram. So the stakeholder value is what drives, it's at the center, driving the strategic alignment that we eventually drive IT value delivery, and then risk management, performance measure, and resource management overlays everything there. Okay, so like just to emphasize, the overall objective of IT governance, therefore, is to drive strategic alignment between IT and the business. So, like I said, the whole essence of IT governance is to ensure that IT delivers value to the company. But then to get this done, there has to be an alignment of IT with the business vision or goal of the organization, whether it is a sole trader, a limited liability, a university, any organization for that matter. So there has to be that strategic alignment between IT, the use of IT, and the business objective of the organization. And this has to be judiciously measured from time to time to be sure that we are getting what we really set out to achieve. So that's the objective of IT governance. Now, remember I said the objective is to strategically align IT with the business. And to do this, IT governance has to be aligned with the enterprise corporate governance. You remember I mentioned when we were defining corporate governance here that it is a whole system of controls, financial and otherwise. And so that helps us to see why the alignment of IT governance with the enterprise corporate governance is also possible. It's possible, and in fact is important, because governance as a whole, corporate governance entails a whole system of controls. So it shouldn't just be limited to the strategic direction of the organization in terms of the core business of the company. IT use or IT governance should also be incorporated into this governance role of the board of directors. So that's what I'm driving at. So now, why is this alignment with ECG, that is the enterprise corporate governance there? Why is it important? Like I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, that IT is now playing a center stage in today's business. And of course, with the pandemic, we really cannot survive anymore without information technology. And it has not only become a business enabler, but a strategic asset, creating competitive advantage to organization, opportunities, and so on. In addition to this, it is also a significant asset. And like every other asset, it is expected that it will bring financial returns. And because we are looking at financial implication, the returns from it, then it should also be a priority of the board of directors as part of their governance role. And again, because with the benefits we have associated with the use of IT comes heightened operational risk, like cybersecurity, data breaches or data losses, privacy, third-party, privacy breaches, and all of that. So with all of this risk associated with it, it is important that every organization, and in fact the board, take it as one of their priority. It's not something that should be relegated to management. So in fact, because board of directors are not really taking up this challenge or seeing it as one of their priorities, many boards will be reluctant to invest in IT. Instead, they will want to outsource the IT function to some IT specialist or consultant, while they get themselves concerned with other business of the organization. But what we are saying here is that this should not be so. The question is why, and the reason why they are reluctant is because they think their investment in IT will not yield the necessary returns that they would expect if they have invested that fund in some other business. And the reason why this is so is because they fail to properly align IT governance with the organization's enterprise governance. So, and as we have seen, corporate governance is the toolkit that enables the organization or the directors to manage the affairs of the company effectively. And so in the same way, IT governance should be embedded as part of this governance toolkit, because that is the only way that management or the company can really derive value for their spend or their investment in IT. Now, in looking for how this alignment will work, because you see, the issue is that corporate governance has been structured. It has been for years. I mean, we've been talking about corporate governance now for about 20 decades. And the structure is already in place, the board of directors know their role, their oversight function and all of that. But then embedding IT governance or aligning IT governance to this role has not been that easy, because it always looks as if, where do we put it? How does it come in into the governance role? And so in trying to find out, when I was preparing this presentation for the accountants I presented it with, I wanted to give them a model that will show them that IT governance can be perfectly aligned with the board of directors function at the, the corporate governance structure that any company could have in place. And so I was looking for a model to present. So in that process, because I was Deloitte trained, and whenever I need information regarding the profession, I go back to my base, to my source, which is Deloitte. So I went into Deloitte website and I was looking for, what have they said about IT governance? What have they said about the, the structure and all of that? But rather than find what they have said about aligning IT with corporate governance, I found this wonderful governance framework that they introduced in 2013. Now, this framework, the Deloitte framework here, was introduced to show the governance structure that an organization should have, and to define which of the functions are purely that of the board of directors and cannot be delegated to anyone, and which of them are just monitoring role of the board. So that was what they tried to use this for. They argue that the foundation to an effective enterprise-wide governance is effective risk management. And that is why they placed in the center of this model risk culture. It's like saying, overlaying everything that the board of directors might be doing in the organization is the culture of risk that must be embedded across the organization. So they therefore believe that a framework is necessary to help define the role of the board and that of management, and also to delineate duties and help to prevent duplications of efforts. So they therefore presented this framework that offers an end-to-end view of overall enterprise corporate governance. It helps the board to execute and identify potential opportunities, and also to improve on potential risk to mitigate. So what this model is, if you look at the top here, it highlights the 5 critical functions of the board that cannot be delegated to anyone. And that's why, it's in green there. And then the blue bit at the bottom is the monitoring function of the board. The board sets the corporate governance infrastructure, that is, they have the people, the processes, the management and all that. And then these are their oversight function, the areas where they only monitor. They don't have to be involved. They're only there to monitor and supervise planning, operations, compliance and all that. But these 5 critical roles, performance, strategy, governance, talent, and integrity, cannot be delegated. It is the role of the board. So that's what this model is for. It's showing us. So when I look at this model, I look critically at each of the function and the notes that came with the model. And then that took me back to the 5 critical focus area of IT governance that we mentioned earlier, which is value delivery, risk management, strategic alignment, resource management, and performance measurement. This diagram is from the website of the IT Governance Institute. So it's just to show the 5 focus areas of IT governance. So I now look at this IT focus area, IT governance focus area, and place it side by side with the Deloitte governance framework. And clearly to me, I could see the alignment, the room for alignment, and how easy it is, to align IT governance with board governance. And so I came up with my own model, if you like, call it Kemi's model. So what I've done is I look at the Deloitte governance model and then the IT governance focus area, and I put it in a table. So the IT governance focus area, I put in the vertical section, that is value delivery, strategic alignment, resource management, risk management, and performance management. And the corporate governance structure that, you know, the Deloitte framework highlighted here, which is the 5 key areas that cannot be delegated, that are absolutely functions at the board level. So what I was trying to do there is to see how the IT governance can align with board, the board function, the director's function. And so putting the IT governance focus area in the vertical section, and then the board of directors function in the horizontal, I look at each of the the description of what this board of directors functions are, what each of the functions are, and I try to see how they align with IT governance. That's what I use this table for. So at the center of it all, like we saw here, is the risk culture that must be embedded across the organization. And that is why I use the golden arrow to link them together. So that's already linked. You know, a risk culture must be embedded in the organization as a whole. And so that automatically links to the risk management of the IT governance, although we are still going to see how it aligns with the integrity function of the board. But at least that golden rule is there to say risk culture must be embedded in the organization as a whole. Now, starting with the governance, let's say, you know, this function of the board is the starting, let's call it the starting point, where the board of directors establish structures or put structures in place that will enable them to carry out their function as the board, at the board level. And here we are talking about structures like the committees, the various committees that the board of directors establish, like the nomination committee, remuneration committee, audit committee, and all of these committees that are established at the board level to help the board of directors to carry out their oversight function. So what I'm saying here is that if you look at this starting point where the board structure is established, a board or a governance structure that wants to incorporate IT governance into the governance of the organization at the board level, at this point where they are establishing the structures, the audit committee, the remuneration committee, and all of the committees, is the point where a committee that would have as its term of reference IT value delivery should also be established. So at this point, while the board of directors are establishing the various committees that will help you to carry out this oversight function, there should also be a board level committee or a board level representation of IT value delivery. And so that's where that governance function of the board aligns with the value delivery function of IT governance. And so let's move on to the strategy function of the board. So at this function is where the board of directors, decide among themselves the strategic priority of the organization and also advise management in the development of strategic priorities that aligns with the mission of the organization. Now, a board that wants to incorporate IT governance or align IT governance with the enterprise corporate governance should, at this point, also make as priority the strategic alignment of IT with business, with their business, a priority. So while they are advising management of the various strategic priorities, IT alignment with the business should also be seen as a priority at this point. And that is why I say it aligns to this function of the board. So at that function where they are deciding and looking at what should be prioritized, IT, strategic alignment of IT with business should also be among the priorities. And then the talent function of the board. This is where the board oversees the talent program, deciding who the CEO, the executive leadership, who should be the executive director, who should be the CEO, who should be this, who should be that. Now, this talent, I say, aligns with the resource management. This function, I would say, aligns with the resource management of IT governance, in that while the board of directors are deciding to recruit the CEO and other leaders, it is at this point that the IT operation of the organization should also be resourced. I'm talking here about the CIO. So while they are deciding who the CEO should be, who the CFO should be, they should also put this as priority, as one of the functions of the board, to decide who the CIO, that is the Chief Information Officer, should be. And this is why this also aligns with the resource management of IT governance. Remember, we are looking at the board level. We are not looking at the management now. At the board level, how can IT be incorporated, IT governance be incorporated into the board structure? That's what this is saying to us. So now the integrity function of the board, according to this Deloitte framework, is saying that, at this function is where the board sets the tone at the top. Like we said, the tone at the top matters a lot. The tone that the board of directors sets determines the overall culture within the organization. And it is also at this point that they set the company's risk appetite. And of course, they also monitor the company's risk exposure to be sure that the company is not exposed to risk that it has not planned for. So, given this role of the board, it is also a point. It is also the function where the board should consider the risk management, IT risk management, as part of, while they are setting the company's risk appetite, IT risk management should also be incorporated into that. And then we talk about the performance. Of course, this is where performance are measured against budgets and align with strategic objective, and also that aligns with the performance management of IT governance. So what we are saying here basically is that there is room for aligning IT governance with the enterprise corporate governance. And so the board, any board that really wants to take IT governance seriously cannot, they do not have any excuse to say IT governance cannot be aligned with the function of the board. It can be, and it can come at the board level. And like I said, risk culture overlays everything and should be embedded across the organization. So that's the model that was presented in that conference. So I just thought I'll show it here as well, because it is something that we can look at for a possible research area. Now, so basically, robust enterprise corporate governance, therefore, should have a framework that will enable the execution of enterprise-wide governance responsibility at all levels, clarifying reporting lines and linkages with IT, identifying decisions, including IT-related decisions, identifying risk, including IT-related risk, and other matters that needs to come to the board level. So now, what is the accountant's role? This is where we are going, and that is the possible research agenda 2. What is the accountant's role in this alignment process? I mentioned earlier that accountants are the custodians of information. Traditionally, they are trained to be the custodian of their organization's information because they have strong ability to identify the informational need of the organization, both internal and external informational need of the organization, and the control needs of the organization. So that is the training. So, and this information, of course, we are talking about information technology, which is the area of accountants. That is what they are trained to do. They are trained to be the custodian of the organization's information need. So poor information governance will lead to devastating effects, and of course, can lead to huge financial loss for any organization where this is not taken seriously. For instance, the global pandemic that we suddenly find ourselves in the last 1 year has created huge financial implications for many organizations, as well as exposing them to emerging IT-related risk. In fact, I cannot, I've lost count of so many phishing emails, phishing texts, IT-related things that I have received in the last 1 year as a result of where we find ourselves and the fact that everybody now operates using IT. So the current environment that we find ourselves also increase the risk of fraud and improper financial reporting. And of course, we know that for any organization to take investment decision that will move the company forward, decision that will affect the market price of the company's shares and all of that, they need the information that the accountants are keeping for the organization. And so the accountants have a big role to play here as the custodian of this information. Now, traditionally, before the advent of information technology, accountants have a particular way of transforming information into data. And that is referred to as the traditional information process. So for us to be able to properly tease out where the accountant's role sits in the alignment process, I felt it was important that we distinguish between the traditional information life cycle that accountants have been used for, especially accountants of my own generation. When I trained as an accountant, we were using box files to store invoices and all of that. And of course, there were softwares then to process accounting information, but we still file things in the box and all of that. But that is not the case anymore. Now we have what we refer to as big data, that is information generated from the use of IT. And the life cycle of big data is completely different from the traditional information life cycle that we know as accountants. So accountants are the custodian of the organization's information, need to be able to see this difference and, update themselves accordingly so that they can fit into this new era that we find ourselves. And so for us to be able to tease out where the accountant's role sits here, I'm going to be distinguishing between the traditional information life cycle and the big data life cycle so that we see where the accountant comes in here. And to do this, I'm going to be relying on the work of Emily Coyne. Is an article by this lady and her colleagues. It's called Big Data Information Governance by Accountants. And I'm going to be looking at the way they've explained the traditional information life cycle and the big data life cycle. So the traditional information life cycle gives us the foundation to understand the process of how data becomes information. And so we are just going to look at that very briefly. So the information life cycle, that is the traditional information life cycle, has 3 phases. That's the creation, the maintenance, and the use phase. The creation phase also has 5 steps. So there is the informational need, where the need for that particular information is assessed. If I use the acquisition of an asset as an example, there is that stage where we determine whether that asset is required or not, and then we start the requisition, approval, and all of that, and then that will eventually lead to acquisition of that information, and then classification into where it should be in the information system, and then conversion into data, and then injection into the system, through software and so on. And then there is the maintenance phase where the data is stored, indexed, refreshing, that is updated. It might need to be updated from time to time, and then interpretation is where, you know, we see if it's still relevant to the organization, and then if not, dispose of it. And overlapping each other is the use. The use phase overlaps the maintenance phase, because at the point of storage, you know, if anyone within the organization needs such information, they then search for it, retrieve it, analyze it, and then maybe generate reports through the information. And, you know, it's after that that the indexing, you know, and then all of this comes up. And when the information is no longer needed, you know, maybe it will be disposed of or something. So that's just the traditional life cycle, which is very simple and straightforward. But then, given the environment that we are at, we now have what is referred to as big data. And big data, as we know it, you know, have three key characteristics, or have a lot of characteristics that can be categorized into three, and which is referred to as the 3 V's of big data. And that is volume, velocity, and variety. Volume, in that big data is big. And of course, that's why it is called big data. It's big and it increases rapidly. In fact, the vastness of this data can easily overwhelm an information system if it is not well governed. And then we have the velocity, that is the increased rate of generation. And because of the rate at which big data is generated, it also calls for increased rate of processing. Otherwise, you know, the system will lose important information, and which can also crumble the activities of the organization. And then big data, as we know it, is heterogeneous. That is, it consists of high variability of data types and you know, and data formats. It comes in different shapes and forms. It comes from different directions, different sources, the social media, the website of the company, from different angles. And you know, not all of this information, of course, will be useful to the organization. And so all of this make it impossible for big data, the traditional life cycle, to be applied to the big data life cycle, and therefore necessitates a revision of the traditional life cycle in order to accommodate the volume, velocity, and variety nature of big data. And so the authors of this, the article that I said I'm relying on, they reviewed the traditional life cycle and highlighted the modifications necessary in order to address all of these idiosyncrasies of the big data. So they introduced a model of big data life cycle that helps to explain the processes that will convert big data into information. So what they did is that it is still you know, the same phases: creation, maintenance, and uses. But some of these you know, steps that we have in the traditional life cycle no longer becomes useful with the big data life cycle. For example, the informational need at the creation level for the traditional life cycle simply requires, you know, looking for the specific information need that the organization requires, and then putting up the necessary process to acquire that information, and then the classification and all of that. But in the case of big data, the informational need is not limited to a specific informational need. It is now, you know, it kind of oversees the sources, the various sources that the information could be coming from. You know, the informational need element is not, you know, they cannot be used in the case of big data to identify specific data acquisition, but potential data sources. And so it therefore requires that so many data sources come at the same time. And, especially with the velocity with which big data is generated, there is so many data sources that we can get the information from. And that therefore necessitates changing the acquisition and classification to collection and sifting, so that at the collection step, the data are collected, are pulled from different sources and then evaluated to decide which of them will most likely provide useful information. And after collecting those data, they are then sifted. At the sifting stage, the data is evaluated to see which of them can really be useful, and only those, especially in the context of the organization, and it's only the useful one that will be kept while the rest will be disposed. It is the useful one that will then be ingested into the company and then integrated or synchronized into the information need of the organization. I'm not an expert in the big data thing, but just to give us a background of the difference between the traditional life cycle and the big data life cycle. Also, at the maintenance stage, where we have indexing, refreshing, for the big data lifecycle, we have pre-processing. Now, this pre-processing step is where data are claimed. So it involves removing duplicates, checking for integrity violation, and filtering, sorting, and grouping appropriate data into where they belong. So that's also coming here, which was not previously in the traditional life cycle. And then we have the normal refreshing, interpretation, and disposition. Then at the use stage, replacing searching there is monitoring. And the reason is because, like we said, big data is huge and the increase of generation is high. And so, and not all of this data is useful. So this stage is to monitor the data that have been sifted and cleaned to be sure that no other, unclean data is not filtering into there. And then we have the analytics and the report generation. So that's big data for you. So one thing that this analysis or the modification of the traditional life cycle helps us to understand is that there are some informational and control risk that are inherent in big data life cycle and which needs to be properly governed. Otherwise, it will pose a lot of risk to the organization. And these are purely, most of them are in the maintenance phase, and that is data storage, the data storage step, the disposition step, and the pre-processing step. Now, the data storage step, like we said, the big data is so vast, is so big, and the rate of generation is also high. So at this stage, if big data is not properly governed or managed, it can lead to loss of data. If I give you an example of myself, when I was preparing this presentation, not for this seminar, but for the conference, when I was given the topic a year before the conference itself, and I've been gathering materials, gathering things to look at to help me prepare for it. And then just 2 weeks to the conference, when I've already gone halfway with my slides, and on a particular day, I left the slides opened on my system, and all of the sources where I was taking resources from, I left them all opened, and they were from my hard disk. So, and then I got up from my desk just to make coffee in the kitchen, and then I got carried away with discussions with family members. And then when I returned, by the time I returned to my desk, I felt, let me go and continue the rest in my room. And then I just picked up my laptop and in the process pulled out the hard disk unconsciously. And then I felt, oh, I realized that I left some items opened. I quickly opened my system and I realized that they were still opened. So I thought, oh, I'm not sure that I saved the last stage I was before I got up. So I plugged back my hard disk But unknown to me, I plugged it into a wrong USB port. You know, it was in a particular USB port. I pulled it out accidentally, and then when I was plugging it back, I plugged it into a different USB port. And then in my head, I thought I have saved it. I tried to save the various things that was opened, and I picked up my computer and went to my room. On getting to my room, I now went into the hard disk to open my files, and I realized I could not open them. It kept saying, this file cannot be retrieved. And I was like, what happened? I ran back to my desktop downstairs, put back the hard disk into the USB port and tried to open it, and I just could not open any of the files. My slides, all of the items, the resources, the articles, and everything that I've downloaded, I could not retrieve everything. I tried, I searched everywhere, and they were all lost. Just 2 weeks to the conference. And so I had to start afresh. So what I'm trying to say here, data storage step is very, very important, and could lead to loss of data, and therefore means the governance process here for the accountant is consistent storage practice that ensures that all business data is organized, categorized, and retrievable. And it requires constant education of this to the people or persons involved with handling that aspect. And then at the disposition step, another risk that big data can pose is under disposition. You know, normally we don't want to dispose of any data. We want to keep it for a while because we don't know when it will be useful. Meanwhile, big data is so enormous and has so many variety of data. Now, if you you know, get into the habit of wanting to keep you know, you don't want to get into the habit of disposing or losing data, it can lead to underdisposition and overstorage. And that can also open up the organization to hackers, because if you have too many information, then you are prone to hackers. And it can, the implication is that keeping outdated and irrelevant data, which could be useless, can also lead to breach of consumer privacy. You know, you have so much data in your database that you have not disposed of. And so one, in addition to the fact that they are occupying space, it will also lead to privacy breaches, and which can bring about litigation. Then we have pre-processing step with all its own risk as well. You know, the pre-processing steps, like I said earlier, is the cleansing step where data are cleansed for duplication and all that. There is the chance of having unclean data due to the 3 V's of big data. And of course, that can lead to dirty data that can result in incomplete or erroneous reporting. So it will require, you know, to structure data collection with a view to minimizing analyst pre-processing time. Here, you know, it is important to schedule review and disposition of data from time to time to ensure that you don't overstore data. So this helps us to better understand the importance of governance and, by extension, the role of the accountant in IT governance and the alignment process. Now, the governance of big data, you know, in the article that said I used in preparing this, they showed this diagram, kind of showing us who the parties are that should be involved with IT governance. So this rounded shape here implies that IT governance governs the implementation of big data lifecycle. You know, it's just to show that the governance of big data is encompassed in IT governance. And the parties whose involvement in this is very, very crucial are the ones on the left-hand side here. And you can see here the accounting function, the legal function, and the IT function are all shown here as very crucial in helping to govern big data. Now, while the consumers are the one on the right-hand side, and that involves the manager, regulators, and stakeholders. So, and you can see here that the first function that is listed here is the accounting function. So the governance of big data is not left to IT specialists alone. So the accounting has a role to play, legal also has a role to play. That's what that is saying. So without proper IT governance, organizations are open to risk at various stages of the big data lifecycle, as we can see from the 3Vs, that allows such data to be prone to various risks. And the 3Vs of big data actually give rise to both informational and control risk. And IT specialists do not have the expertise to control or be able to manage this risk alone. Why is this so? Because IT specialists lack expertise in big data governance. The fact that they have IT skills does not endow them with the necessary knowledge they need to design a useful information system to address the informational and control risk brought about by the 3Vs. And some of these things that we are referring to the lack of understanding of how to measure or report some of this information. The information comes, the IT specialists will see those information, but they lack the understanding of measurement and the reporting needs of the business. And some of these measurement and reporting needs are the specialties of business specialists like accounting, finance, operations, the HR, and the legal specialists, not the IT. The IT man is there to help to ensure that the organization work without little or no technical issues. But in terms of governing the information that is generated through IT, the IT specialists do not have that specialty. And that is where business specialists like accountants, finance practitioners, HR, and all of these specialists need to come in. And in particular, the accountants in the area of big data governance, they have the expertise, to know what information is needed. Specifically, they are trained and skilled on governance issues relating to control objectives and regulatory compliance. So those are some of the skills that accountants have, and they have the skill to be able to identify the informational and control need of the organization. And so because of that, the governance of big data more or less rests squarely on their shoulder. Because this focus of the accounting profession on control reinforces the value of increased collaboration that they need to have between themselves and the IT specialists. So in designing and maintaining the information system of the organization, the accountant needs to collaborate with the IT specialists for them to be able to set up the control objectives and the informational needs of the organization, and be able to embed that in the IT setup right from the start. So, however, accountants, we are traditionally trained just on debit and credit, not really IT, which is why the introduction of IT into the curriculum of accountants is very, very key at this point in time. So because accountants require that additional skill, just like I said that IT specialism or expertise does not endow IT specialists with all the necessary knowledge to design a useful information system. In the same way, the fact that accountants are trained in governance and information and control need does not give them all the expertise that they need to be able to manage big data. And so they have to be trained technically in this area as well. For so many years, accountants have preoccupied themselves with just auditing the IT controls. I've been involved in that as well in the past. We go to the client office and we want to audit them. Meanwhile, the implementation of this control in itself should also, be part of the role of the accountant. We have left it for a very long time in the shoulder of the IT specialist, but today, the business environment that we are at requires that accountants also engage themselves in the process. And therefore, that requires that accountants need to expand their education and training to adequately fit into this role. And so that brings me to the conclusion that to make an impact in IT governance, as accountants, we need to be well-rounded. So we need well-rounded accountants who will not only be considering the numbers or what the number says, but who will be, saddled with the responsibility of ensuring that the 3 V's of big data are well managed in such a way that the organization is able to mitigate the risk that this would bring. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Like I said, it is just to open our eyes to areas in accounting also that can be, especially the role of accountants in all of these things that we are seeing around IT, fintech, and everything that everybody is talking about. I just want to bring out the fact that accountants also have a role to play, and we as researchers can research into some of these things to see how we can inform the accounting profession in this area and how we can help them to identify their role and where they need to come in. So I will stop here and invite comments, feedback, brainstorming. What areas, what points do you think we can look at and as researchers in this area? I will hand over to Victor.
Wow, this has been, for me, a great journey of discovery, and I have had sheer joy of learning all important aspects of IT governance by the accountant. Yeah, including basically I'm converted about IT governance from your talk and the sharing of knowledge. The role of IT governance is even greater, given the COVID-19 prevailing environment, as you have clearly stated. And then also to congratulate you on the Kemi model, the metrics that you presented that shows the interaction between IT governance and enterprise governance. And I think that actually it would be possible to invoke some measurement tools and be able to put in some data so you can quantify the values that go into the metrics. That shouldn't be a big deal. But also about the emphasizing of big data, the artificial intelligence concept and life cycle of the BDLC that you mentioned, the risks associated with them. And I'm glad you touched on cyber security. I suppose people will have something to say about the threat of cyber security and the attempt to grab values from people's accounts, online, and before the auditors do. This is great. What I'll do now is open to a discussion, comments, questions, views, and as Kemi said, maybe to try to map out trajectories for research, but also changes in the behavior practices. We have also practitioners around. Okay, so please put up your hand. You can use the button on display here, our show of hands, and then you can start the discussion, or you can just show your face and intervene. Who would like to go first? I suppose Godfrey seems to be ready, set to go. Why not? The floor is yours, Godfrey, if you want to.
You put it on me. I was listening, and I am, ironically enough, I teach a course in research methods. And just last March, I tried to impress on the class the changing role of auditing. I'm not an accountant, but I do quantitative work. And the role of audit sampling is now being, the face of audit sampling is changing because of big data, because of machine learning and all of these type of things. No longer will auditors even be taking samples. They'll be able to actually analyze every entry and analyze everything with this. And then not only that, with machine learning, they may even be able to anticipate, and predict certain types of risks in the data. And for one of the bread and butter ways that I've learned that accountants detect fraud is using so-called Benford's law. That would also be very challenging. So I was just looking at this from a what drew me to your talk is I was looking at this from a statistical and technical point of view to teach my research methods class, and then I saw the IT governance aspect of it, which I didn't see in the literature. So I'm really grateful for that. And next time I teach the course, I'll make sure that I incorporate that. So I don't have anything other than that, and to say that it's something I'm glad I am exposed to, and I will incorporate in my teaching next semester.
Great comments. Thank you, Kemi.
Thanks, Charles Cadogan. Did I pronounce that well? Is that the first name or the
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, thanks for the comments. And those are some of the things I really want to achieve with that, to sensitize us researchers and lecturers to incorporate this into the training of tomorrow or future accountants, because that is where the world is going. Big data, we can't go back to the traditional life cycle. We can only go forward. And yeah, so I'm happy that you are going to bring it on board on your teaching. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Godfrey, for mentioning the sampling. It's only this morning when we had a reading group meeting that another accountant in our group, Tolu, was mentioning about the importance of samples in accounting and finance. And I think that message has again surfaced here in this discussion. I'm trying to see whether I can find some information in my chat room. I don't seem to. Oh, okay. Mentioning Toru. Toru is another qualified accountant as well as researcher in the school. So Toru, you have the floor.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you, Kemi. And that was a very interesting presentation, and a lot to actually disaggregate from what you have presented. I can imagine you writing up to 5 papers from just this single presentation. But the goal is for us to be able to bring out researchable topics from what you have presented. And you started by saying that you are looking at a possibility of incorporating information technology governance at the board level, and how to now measure some of the impacts on firm performance, for example, or returns. I think there are some potentials. For example, accountants are about reporting.
Yeah.
What about looking at IT risk reporting? Okay, from the narratives, and see whether or not this is this practice is in place, and if it is in place, how effective it is. And relating to that, perhaps we want to see if the skill at the board level, whether if we have IT professionals at the board level or management level, for example, if the CEO is an IT expert or CIO that you mentioned, or the CFO, who is both an accountant or an information technology expert. Do we see improvement in IT risk reporting as a result of the participation of these talented individuals at the board or management level? that would be one area, an interesting area that you may want to look at. Another area is the application of Bradford rule. I don't know if you have come across Bradford rule before. Okay, the ability of IT professionals to use information technology. In this case, we can even use machine learning to uncover fraud by looking at the probability distribution of numbers in the accounts. I think these two areas relate to the general issue that you're bringing up today, the role of IT and the role of accountants in IT. Thank you. As I said, so many issues that we can look at, but those two issues quickly came to my mind, and I thought I should let you know. Thanks.
Yeah. Before I ask Kemi to respond, let me say that those are highly valuable comments. And what I see is on one part, activating the theory from the Kemi model into numbers, but also when you start mentioning, looking at the probability distribution of accounts in auditing, you're actually adding to the initial comments by Godfrey to say that with all this statistical knowledge, and then we need to be able to put together something together and come up with the advancing this knowledge. But Kemi, the floor is yours to respond.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tolu. And in fact, this is exactly what I wanted to achieve with this, just brainstorming and ideas on what can be researchable. Because like I said, accountants always think there's nothing to research in accounting. Meanwhile, there are lots of areas that we can look into. And in particular, I like the second point that says the application of Bradford rule and the possibility of using machine learning or IT to uncover fraud. It's an area that I think is very fascinating that I might want to consider in future. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you too for adding that, Kemi, because it refers to these conversations involving Kemi and Toro and some many members of the finance and management department about the forensic accounting aspects of it. I think both of you are putting fingers on that aspect. So I think the dream is there, and yes, God help us ahead, of course, in making this possible. Yeah. Okay. I don't know whether you can see. I can't see the chat room, but Meng, can you see the chat room or not?
I can see something from Juliet.
Okay.
It's just a comment from her. She said the CFO, typically a qualified accountant, has a role to play at the board level to shift the paradigm.
Okay, maybe. Yeah. Maybe Kemi, if Juliet is still around, can we ask her to unmute and share her comment with us, and then we can and ask you to respond. Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, Professor Kemi. Thank you. I think that's very exciting what you're on. I think you're spot on in terms of accounting and moving accounting forward. And I think that's why I was making this comment. But I think maybe in a big organization, for example, I think there's two things. Practically, in a big organization, you'll find the CFO has the role on the board, and then you find a CIO will come in, as you mentioned. And I just find in a big organization, you will think the board will decide, should we go for the CFO or CIO? Typically, they'll always choose the CIO to run that IT governance piece. But I think in a smaller organization, I think 100% you would find the CFO would potentially do what you're saying and run the IT governance, especially in this new age of new data, the new crypto firms. I think you would find it's a CFO that they have on their board level to do the IT. And it could be from what you're saying about the information, the information part of accountants harnessing information. But something else that I read also previously in terms of what you're saying is an idea, a researchable idea, could be around the area of ESG. That's very topical right now. And potentially, could the accountant be the person who now finds the number for ESG to bring it into financial statements? As do you see, as a researchable idea for, in terms of bringing us forward and moving us forward, as you were saying.
Yeah. Thanks, Juliet. Actually, you see, most accounting researchers have concentrated on ESG, myself being one of them. In the last few decades, where the issue of social responsibility, environmental issues, became the talk of the moment, we see everyone going into that area, and that area happened to be the focus of most accountants today. The CSR reporting, the CSR communication, ESG, and all of that. So that area, I would say, has been really over-researched now.
Okay.
And area that I think needs more attention in terms of the accounting function is this IT governance, which is why I picked interest when I saw it. Like, I have done a lot of research on ESG, for example, and a lot of accounting researchers are working in that area. But no one seemed to be looking at this area, like this things that the possible research agenda that Tolu pointed out. They are areas that no one has really looked into. For example, IT risk reporting, the impact of accounting, at the board level, and the effect on IT risk reporting. I have not seen anything in that area. I have not seen anything on, whether machine learning or IT can help to uncover fraud. There has not been anything in those areas. And those are the areas that I really want to, encourage discussion. Maybe not this seminar. We may not stop at this seminar. It is something that I might eventually plan a workshop for, where we can come together and brainstorm and see what ideas we can look at in this area, and see what possible grants we might be able to get to assist with the research. Because the one unfortunate thing with accounting research, maybe because accountants are not bringing themselves forward, is fund. There's really no fund. I've not seen any grant application that is asking for things around accounting. It's usually sustainability reporting and all of that. But meanwhile, we need to research this area as well. And it is something that I'll be interested in taking forward. Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you.
Very good observation there, and a very good discussion, and looking forward to our future work, both research and applications. Is there any other note in the chat room, Meng, which any person, I think Richard, but Richard had apologized because he was going into a meeting, but had posted something in the chat room. Any other information in the chat room?
No, I think Victor has made, Richard posted that it's not just financial information integrity, but there are wider reputational and integrity issues involved. I don't know what he was trying to say there. And then he has also said that the presentation has raised some very interesting issues, which he said he's going to discuss with me later. Yeah, which is very
excellent. Well. Excellent. Okay. Good. Let me see whether there's a show of hand with a question, a comment, a contribution. If you want to open your camera or unmute and speak, or if you want to raise your hand. Okay. I don't see any coming up. So let me use this opportunity to thank Kemi for unveiling such an interesting areas of work and bringing a lot of accounting issues that actually go beyond the accounting and incorporate some elements of finance. For example, when Kemi was explaining the issue that bring together the IT governance and the enterprise governance, I couldn't help thinking about agency theory or the principal agent problem, and where you have so many players and each is trying to maximize their own interest, or they are trying actually to be able to reconcile their interests together and then bring in better performance or efficiency. So I think this has provoked quite a huge number of ideas which we could follow from here. So thanks very much, Kemi, for once again for this exposition, for exciting our interest in this particular area. Let me thank all of you again for being able to participate and give us the contribution. I think, as Kemi said quite correctly, this is only just the beginning of the discourse in these areas. We could see from the many contributions that there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done, new areas being uncovered, putting numbers, the statistical component of it into the theory, applications into forensic accounting, for example, machine learning to uncover fraud, as mentioned. I think this is only the start, the beginning of an exciting journey into IT governance, accounting, and many other multidisciplinary possible approaches. So once again, let me thank you all. There is a hand going up. Okay, let me see. The hand is
Victor, it's me.
Oh yes, that's Dr. Andrew Mwaba, who is on the board of governors of Central Bank of Zambia. Andrew, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kemi, for this presentation. Very interesting indeed, because at the board level, these issues always come up. Now, I wanted to check with you, when you talk about the head of information in the organization, you are now referring to a chief information officer. Traditionally, most firms will say director of accounting. So is this now the new trend going that way to broaden the functions of the IT?
Yeah, okay. If I want to get the question right, are you asking if CIO is a new nomenclature? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, this CIO terminology. This is moving beyond the typical director of IT in most firms. It goes with the responsibilities, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it's this. It's the same thing. I'm talking. Well, it's called chief information officer in some organization or director of IT in some organization. What I'm just saying is that at the board level, there should be a board level, director that would be responsible for IT, in order to really bring IT governance into the enterprise corporate governance. That person could be an accountant. In fact, in many organizations, such people might be an accountant as well by training, but then they've got all of the IT skill and they're assuming that role. And in some other organization, it's just someone who is an IT specialist.
Okay, yeah. No, that's understood. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to make a quick comment.
Yeah, please go ahead.
On Victor's agency theory that kind of sparked an idea in my mind. One of the things I see emerging in the corporate finance literature these days is the notion of people again using machine learning to look at the minutes of board meeting, kind of parse words, look for certain keywords and buzzwords. Those things will also be instrumental for people like me who care about executive compensation. What kind of how much sway does the CEO have over the board that kind of leads to his or her compensation package? So I think you're right. especially, again, based on, I teach students in both finance and accounting, and my accounting students are always interested in audit committee behavior. And the fact that you place audit committees smack dab in the middle of the IT governance controversy, in fact, having a seat on the board, as it were, I think the IT committee would be a way to go to start off. Again, I'll give some of my, again, like I said, I'm in finance, not accounting, but I teach research methods to accountants as well. So I'm quite sure some students may have some, may be happy for some of those research ideas. And maybe I'll send you an email, Kemi,
Okay.
and see, since I'm now embarking on this machine learning journey myself, but mostly from a critical point of view because of all the emphasis on data mining. But that's another issue altogether.
All right. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Godfrey, for again coming back with those important observations. I could see Professor Joshua Abo from University of Ghana, Legon. I don't know whether he wanted to contribute to the discussion. Tolu, you came back. I don't know whether you, okay. Good. Okay, so I think we're also coming to, we are running out of time, coming to the close of this session. So I once again thank Kemi profoundly and thank all of you for being able to make it and start off this discussion that I'm sure will preoccupy us in terms of research and commitments for many years ahead. Thank you indeed, and have a great evening or morning, whichever part of the world you seem to be you are located in, right now. Thank you indeed. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for listening.